Good morning, all. And first of all, thank you very much, General Rupsis. It's an honor to be here in Vilnius. And yesterday, I had the pleasure of walking through the Old Town to enjoy its medieval history and take in all the historical buildings. And I can definitely see why it received its designation as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But it is also a testament to Lithuania's resilience and endurance. Despite multiple occupations, Vilnius has not only thrived, but has also managed to preserve its roots, culture, and heritage. I'm pleased that this planned visit was still possible, and that I have had the good fortune of experiencing your city in person. Just this morning, I was welcomed to the Ministry of National Defense by Lieutenant General Rupsis, and of course the Lithuanian Armed Forces Orchestra and the Honor Guard Company. And all entities were quite impressive. The visit is also an opportunity for me to thank the people of Lithuania on behalf of the NATO Military Committee for their continued and unwavering support to the alliance. It has been 18 years since Lithuania made the sovereign choice to join NATO. Along with Estonia, Latvia, Slovakia, Slovenia, and Slovenia, Lithuania recognized the value of walking through our open door and becoming a part of the strongest military alliance of the world. And NATO members recognized the value of having Lithuania by their sides. Lithuania has quickly become a staunch and important ally, contributing actively to not only its own security, but also to allied, European, and global security. We are grateful for your contributions to the NATO-led missions in Iraq and in Kosovo. Your warships regularly participate in our standing naval maritime groups as part of the maritime component of the NATO response force. You help secure Allied skies by hosting the Baltic air policing mission at the Suale air base. You host one of our NATO force integration units, which facilitate the rapid deployment of the VJTF and other NRF elements at high readiness levels in order to enhance the alliance's responsiveness. And crucially, Lithuania is also home to one of NATO's enhanced forward presence multinational battle groups. The battle group in Rukla is led by Germany, and there are currently 6 allied nations contributing troops and equipment on a rotational basis. In my role as Dutch Chief of Defense in the period 2017-2021, I had the honor of visiting Lithuania several times to meet our troops stationed in Rukla and the training area in Pabrade. A few days from now, I will attend a ceremony to commemorate the 5th anniversary of EFP. These battle groups remain a clear demonstration of NATO's response to a deteriorating security environment, and they will stay in place for as long as that is necessary. NATO must remain vigilant and ready. As an alliance, we will continue to take all necessary vigilance measures to defend and protect all allies, including through strengthening our collective defense. Allies have also been stepping up their own efforts. Lithuania has been investing in new major equipment, such as military rotorcraft and armored vehicles, as well as replacing older weapons. You also lead by example on defense spending and are set to further increase it in the coming years. You share your expertise on energy security through the NATO Center of Excellence in Vilnius, which I look forward to visiting in 2 days. And Lithuania is also part of a group of allies who have volunteered their national cyber capabilities for NATO operations. These are all clear demonstrations of Lithuania's commitment to the alliance, and a clear statement that we are stronger and safer when we stand together. Last month, I hosted virtually the first NATO Military Committee in Chiefs of Defense session of 2022. And this meeting was set against an uncertain and challenging backdrop, on the back end of the first NATO-Russia Council since 2019. Lieutenant General Rupsis and the 29 other NATO military chiefs delivered probing insight into the current security situation. They discussed their preferred military input to the new strategic concept, assessed the implementation of the NATO's war-fighting capstone concept, as well as the progress on the concept for the deterrence and defense of the Euro-Atlantic area. The concept for deterrence and defense of the Euro-Atlantic area focuses on military requirements we need to deter and defend today. The NATO war-fighting capstone concept offers a vision to remain military strong in the future. Both concepts will help set NATO's military priorities and approach to current and future threats. The NATO Chiefs of Defense also reflected on future requirements, be it in regards to capabilities or force generation. The resulting guidance from these discussions will allow the NATO Military Committee to take the alliance's work forward in the coming months. Restrictions permitting, I hope to be able to return your warm hospitality, Valdemaras, when I welcome you to Brussels in May for our next Chief of Defense meeting. But for now, I'm very much looking forward to the rest of the program, which will include a series of meetings with your President, Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, and members of the Committee on National Security and Defense. Later, I will also be meeting with representatives of the Lithuanian Armed Forces and delivering a speech at the Institute of International Relations and Political Science of the Vilnius University with students, lecturers, and military students attending. I look forward to the numerous and insightful exchanges over the next few days and will make sure to share them with the NATO military representatives when I'm back in Brussels. Thank you very much.
Labas rytas. Good morning one more time. Really, it's a pleasure and huge privilege to host you. Today we are hosting not only the highest ranking officer of NATO, but also old and excellent friend of Lithuania. Really, as you mentioned, you have visited many times Lithuania in the previous position as Chief of Defense of the Netherlands, but now we are hosting the good friend who makes huge and important decisions for us and for all NATO. Thank you so much. I'm now switching to Lithuanian language. Labą dieną. Man didelė garbė pasveikinti NATO karinio komiteto pirmininką admirolą Robo Bauerį Lietuvoje. Šio karininko atsakomybė yra karinis patarimas NATO veiksmų 30 NATO šalių, tame tarpe ir Lietuvoje. Admirolo dėmesys Lietuvoje aiškiai parodo jo supratimą apie mūsų regionui kylančias grėsmes. Esu jam dėkingas už tai, kad ne kartą, ne tik žodžiais, bet ir sprendimais bei veiksmais pademonstravo NATO veikimą bei efektyvumą. Tikiu, kad tai Lietuvos žmonėms padės jaustis dar saugesniems. Prieš kelias minutės pasibaigusio susitikimo metu aptarėme saugumo situaciją mūsų regione, Lietuvoje dislokuotų NATO vienetų veiklą bei tvirtą įsipareigojimą prisidėti prie NATO atgrasymo, o prireikus ir gynybos veiksmų mūsų regione. Saugumo situacija reikalauja nuolatinių diskusijų dėl atsako veiksmų visais lygmenimis. Agresyvus Rusijos elgesys jau ilgą laiką rodo, kad saugumo situacija gali pasikeisti labai greitai. Nėra laiko snausti. Ir šis vizitas dar kartą parodo, kad mūsų saugumas nėra tik mūsų reikalas. Stebėdami šiandienos įtemptą situaciją galime pasidžiaugti. Esame stipriausio gynybinio alijanso nariai. Visgi turime patys daugiau dirbti dėl savo stiprybės ir saugumo. Šiandien susitikime ne tik aptarėme darbinius klausimus, bet ir patikinau, kad mes, Lietuvos kariuomenė, Lietuvos valstybė, darome viską, kad būtume lygiaverčiai sąjungininkai. Užtikriname priimančios šalies paramą, treniruojamės, semės ir dalinamės patirtimi. Teikime paramą Ukrainai, taip pat demonstruodami solidarumą sunkiu metu su šita valstybė. Atsižvelgdami į situaciją skiriame papildomus pajėgumus į NATO greito reagavimo pajėgas. NATO simbolika yra užrašyti žodžiai. Budrumas yra laisvės kaina, tai mus jungia. Tai turime pasiekti kartu. Būtent tai mus ir daro stipriais ir saugiais. Ačiū uždėmesį.
Go through NATO or through some bilateral agreements? And if through NATO, do you have any visualization of how many troops can be sent to?
The one doesn't exclude the other. So what you will most likely see is that if you want to have a decision quickly, then most likely it will be bilateral. Because that doesn't require the consent of all the allies. And then most likely you see that a nation will send more forces as a result of a bilateral discussion between two nations. One is the sending nation and the other one is the receiving nation. That in itself is not then a NATO decision, but it is all part of the discussion on our posture along our borders. And if we then most likely will get a tasking from the NATO ministerial next 16-17 February, the defense ministerial, most likely the NATO military authorities will be tasked to look at the posture along our borders, which will then result in a military advice on where the troops should go and the numbers and what is the preferred option militarily. And that will then lead to a decision within NATO to change the present posture that we have. That doesn't preclude an earlier decision from a nation to a sending nation to a receiving nation. So if Germany would send more troops, if that is the decision of Germany, it's not a NATO decision at that time, then that is possible. And then if Lithuania is willing to receive those additional troops, that is fine. So it's not actually something that is an issue. Sometimes it is perceived as a problem, but it's actually very often a question of timing, and a discussion between two nations is going faster than a discussion amongst 30 nations. But both will happen. I'm not going to talk about that, but because then I would walk ahead of the. I would, say that we don't need the time to get the military advice that we will get a tasking for later on. But there will be an answer to that question.
Good morning, Admiral. You mentioned that during this visit you will situation with our officials. How do you think, in your opinion, seriously, Ukraine and Russia and all the geopolitical, how it developed during past months? Do you see any kind of way how we could
First of all, there is a buildup of troops along the borders of Ukraine. first on the Russian side of the border, and then later on in the last couple of weeks also on the Belarus border of Ukraine. And that is a very concerning development. We're talking about more than 100,000 troops now that are being built up, not only the fighting forces, but also more and more the forces that is necessary to support those forces. So you have to think about hospitals and other things that are necessary. If you're really considering an invasion, you actually need more than the fighting forces. And that is something we also see now more and more being gathered along both the borders of Russia with Ukraine and Belarus with Ukraine. So that in itself is very concerning. Then, of course, there is the concept treaty text that Russia sent to NATO, which was published by Russia, so it's open information now. And those demands are actually very, very high. I mean, they are talking about getting back to the situation of 1997, basically re-establishing a sort of zone around Russia of nations, which then would make Russia more comfortable in terms of their defense. Those demands are, for obvious reasons, cannot be met, because they concern individual sovereign nations. And so it's up to those nations whether they want that or not, and for obvious reasons they don't want that. They don't want to go back to that period of time, because a number of them joined NATO, and they are part of the alliance now. So it is a difficult situation with, on the one hand, the buildup of troops, and on the other hand, the high demands in terms of on the Russian side. We still believe there is a diplomatic way out. And so that's basically what we are doing. On the one hand, we try to continue with the diplomatic talks to make sure that Russia understands that we are listening to their concerns, and that we're trying to find solutions for those concerns. And on the other hand, we are looking at our own readiness with regard to the alliance to make sure that Russia understands that if they would take any measures against the alliance, that it would have serious consequences.
Admiral, to follow up quickly, obviously NATO has considered many scenarios what kind of outcome would develop during this time, and obviously we heard some information about this month. That it's the crucial time for, if invasion happens, it might happen this month, because while we will look to March or even further months, there would be more difficulties, military-wise. Are these concerns, and if NATO believes that this month is the crucial one?
If you look at the buildup of the forces, Russia could be able to actually have sufficient forces for a serious invasion, of which I don't know whether it will happen. Let me be clear on that, because I don't know of a decision of Mr. Putin. But if you look at the buildup of the forces, it is possible to have that sort of an operation on the Russian side by the end of this month. And whether they do that, whether they have the true intention or not, is something we don't know. Because, and that's something that is in our nations more and more difficult to understand, that one person actually has that authority to make that decision. And in Russia, that is Mr. Putin. In our system, it would be a different situation, because it would be a larger group of people having that debate. The media would have a role in that, which is all not the case in Russia at the moment, unfortunately.
One last for me, if it's possible.
One more question for... We see a lot of Russian troops around Ukraine, but we also see that
First and foremost, I would say it is of concern, because we see now the troops in Belarus as well. We now see about 30,000 troops in Belarus, and they are deployed by Russia in concert, of course, with the government of Belarus. That is a concern. But I think it is very important to say that we are not only looking at Ukraine. So we continue to look at the whole of the alliance, from the Arctic to the Mediterranean, from the Atlantic Ocean to the eastern borders. And basically every day, the Supreme Allied Commander Europe is looking at the whole 360-degree picture in terms of the threats to the alliance. So it is not that we're all looking only at Ukraine. I think that's an important message for the people of Lithuania, because we understand the concerns in Lithuania, in the Baltic states in general, in Poland, that in the northeast there is a building threat as well because of the troops of Belarus, of the Russians in Belarus, for example. So we are looking at that. Part of the discussions your colleague mentioned about the German government and the possibility of additional troops in Lithuania is part of that discussion. So yes, NATO is constantly looking at this. And as I said, the change to the forced posture, so where do we have troops in the alliance continuously in the different nations, is the debate about that is the result of the things that are ongoing now. So yes, we are looking at it. There might be changes in the future as a result of these developments. It very much depends, of course, on whether the Russian troops in Belarus, for example, remain in Belarus. If they go back to Russia, it's a different discussion. But if they would remain in Belarus, that's part of the equation of looking to the changes.
My question is also for our chief of military. Does, in NATO opinion and in Lithuania's opinion, does military troops in Belarus pose direct threat to Lithuania and alliance in general?
Well, of course, in military terms, it is a combination of the capabilities. That is one. So if you look at the posture of the Russian troops in Belarus, then yes, you have to consider militarily whether it is a threat to the Baltic states and more particular to Lithuania now. But then, of course, you have to look at intent as well. Is there indications that the Russians or Belarus has an intention to hurt the Baltic states and in particular Lithuania? And up until now, we don't see an intent. We don't expect an attack on NATO soil by Russia, either directly or via Belarus.
So you don't consider Mr. Lukashenko's speeches and those things currently and obviously oftentimes aggressive threats to Lithuania. So it's not a real indication for me.
Well, it's part of the discussion, but rhetoric, political rhetoric is one. We look at situation on the ground, of course, and in the air, and the military indications and warnings. That is of course, it's the combination of everything that will make us look at it and make the assessment whether we are looking at a real threat to NATO. And at the moment, the answer is no.
Jo, tai atsakydamas į tą patį klausimą, praktiškai admirolas jau ir atsakė. Tai mano nuomonė tikrai yra ta pati, kad taip, tai keičia padėtį, tai tikrai keičia padėtį saugumo ir atitinkamai tiek NATO, tiek mūsų nacionalinių karinių pajėgų parengti. Bet taip taktiškai, grinai arba operaciškai, tiesioginės grėsmės šiai minutei, šį pirmadienį nėra. Bet aš naudodamas dabar vieną iš pasakytų prieš tai admirolo Bauerio minčių man personaliai, kad IFP, kurį mes turim čia, tai yra NATO, kaip sakė, strategic beauty. I'm talking about TFP, as you told me. Yeah, tai žinokit, vien tai, kad mūsų Lietuvoje yra dislokuotos NATO pajėgos, tai tiesiogiai grasinti mum šiai minutei būtų paprasčiausiai neatsakinga, net pasakyčiau kvaila ir iš esmės pakeistų situaciją ne regione, bet pakeistų bendrai saugumo situaciją pasaulyje. Todėl aš nemanau, kad kažkokios tiesioginės karinės grėsmės dabar būtų arba keltų.
Tai tada esminis dalykas, kiek galėtų atvykti Vokietijos karių ir kitas niuansas, kokį jūs turite dabar naujausią informaciją dėl Rusijos veiksmų Baltarusijoje, sakykime, galimos Ukrainos invazijos?
Oficialūs dabar, sakykime, pranešimai arba oficialiais duomenim, tai yra rengiamasi finaliniai pratybų stadijai, kuri prasidės vasario 10 ir turėtų tęsis iki vasario 20 arba 29, bet aišku, neramu yra tai, kad šitos pratybos, kurios bus arba yra vykdomos Baltarusijoje, jos labai yra suderintos su viso to, kas vyksta aplink Ukrainos šiaurinę sieną arba šiaurės rytų sieną. Tai tikrai yra kompleksinės, jungtinės ir visas dimensijas apimančios pratybos, tai galima spėti, jeigu bus priimtas sprendimas invazija į Ukrainą, tai čia yra paskutinis tasai suderinimas visų veiksmų, visų pajėgų. Tai matosi toksai bendras vaizdas. Dabar kalbant apie karius, tikrai mes kalbame su Vokietija, su Vokietijos gynybos ministerija. Yra numatyti laikai, yra numatyti indikatoriai, kada ir kaip turėtų atvykti, o karių skaičius tai lieka turbūt grinai karinis sprendimas, kiek jų turėtų būti pagal esamą situaciją, tiek ir atvyks, kiek reiks.